The story you're about to hear is not a tale of fiction. It's a chilling account of a real-life monster, Jorge Avila Torres, whose heinous crimes sent shockwaves through communities across America. In the quiet town of Zion, Illinois, a shadow was cast over the innocence of childhood. Two young girls, Laura Hobbs and Tobias, were found brutally murdered, their lives taken far too soon. The gruesome nature of their deaths hinted at a monster in our midst. This monster was not the stuff of nightmares or horror movies, but a living, breathing entity, lurking in the shadows of the seemingly peaceful neighborhood. His name was Jorge Avila Torres. Torres, an acquaintance of the girls, resided in the same neighborhood. But little did anyone know, beneath the normal facade was a man capable of unimaginable horrors. Shortly after the crime, he slipped away, joining the ranks of the Marines. But his dark deeds were far from over. Across state lines in Virginia, Navy Petty Officer Amanda Jean Snell met a similar tragic fate, murdered in cold blood. Two other women were abducted and assaulted, their lives forever marred by the encounter with this cruel predator. In each of these instances, a trail of DNA evidence was left behind, a silent witness to the atrocities committed. This DNA evidence would eventually connect the dots, linking Torres to the murders of Laura Hobbs and Tobias. It was a chilling revelation that shook the community to its core. The friendly neighbor, the Marine, was a ruthless killer. Torres's reign of terror did not go unpunished. He was sentenced to death for Snell's murder and received multiple life sentences for his other crimes. His jailhouse confession and the undeniable DNA evidence led to the exoneration of Jerry Hobbs, Laura's father, who had been falsely accused and confessed under duress. The revelation of Torres's guilt was a bitter pill to swallow. The monster had been living among them, hidden in plain sight. But justice, though delayed, was served, and the monster was finally unmasked. This is the story of Jorge Avila Torres, a man whose dark deeds would eventually come to light. In the quiet town of Zion, Illinois, a nightmare was about to unfold that would forever change the lives of two innocent girls. This peaceful Midwestern community was shattered when Laura Hobbs and Tobias, two young girls full of life and laughter, were brutally murdered. Their bodies were discovered bearing the horrifying evidence of their ordeal, stab wounds and signs of sexual assault. The tranquility of the town was replaced by a chilling fear that gripped everyone's hearts. It wasn't long before the police had a suspect in custody. Jerry Hobbs, Laura's own father, found himself under the harsh glare of the law. He was the one who had discovered the bodies of his daughter and her friend. Overwhelmed by grief and under intense pressure from the authorities, he confessed to the unthinkable. The news of the confession sent shockwaves through the community. A father accused of killing his own child and her friend was a narrative that no one could digest. The image of Hobbs, broken and defeated, confessing to a crime that he didn't commit, was a sight that would haunt Zion for years to come. Yet there was an unsettling feeling that something was amiss. The confession, the arrest, it all seemed too quick, too easy. But the town's desperation for closure and the need for justice for Laura and Crystal seemed to drown out the doubts. The nightmare had just begun. The truth was far more sinister, and it lay hidden, waiting to be unraveled. The real monster, the one responsible for taking away the innocence of Zion, was still out there, free and unknown to everyone. A father was blamed, a community left in shock, but the real monster was still lurking in the shadows. After the shocking double murder, Avila Torres didn't lay low. Instead, he joined the Marines. Indeed, the irony is chilling. This man who had just been involved in a horrific crime chose not to disappear into the shadows. He made the audacious move of stepping into the spotlight, joining one of the most respected institutions in America. Jorge Avila Torres, a name that would soon become synonymous with terror, was now a part of the United States Marine Corps. He was not just a neighbor, a friend, or an acquaintance. He was a Marine. And while his uniform might have been a symbol of honor, courage, and commitment, his actions were a stark contrast to these noble ideals. But how did he manage to evade detection initially? How did he slip through the cracks, undetected, unnoticed? It's a question that sends shivers down the spine and leaves us pondering the depths of human deceit. Avila Torres was cunning, blending into his surroundings like a chameleon. He hid his monstrous side behind a facade of discipline and dedication, fooling everyone around him. His life in the Marines presented an illusion of normalcy, an illusion that was far removed from the grim reality. He was living a double life, one that would eventually crumble under the weight of his heinous crimes. But for a while, Avila Torres seemed untouchable. He carried on with his life, basking in the respect and admiration that came with his uniform. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a predator hiding in plain sight. It was a horrifying realization that would only come to light in the wake of more violence and terror. While he wore a uniform of honor, his actions were far from honorable. This is the chilling tale of Jorge Avila Torres, the Marine with a dark secret, a man who managed to deceive an entire community, an entire institution. A man who, beneath the guise of honor, hid a darkness that would shock the world. Avila Torres's reign of terror was far from over. As if the heinous double murder in Zion, Illinois wasn't enough, Avila Torres's thirst for violence remained unquenched. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, living among us, hiding behind the respected uniform of a Marine. This man who was supposed to protect and serve was in truth a monster, lurking in the shadows. In the quiet corners of Virginia, he found his next victim, Navy Petty Officer Amanda Jean Snell. Snell, an innocent life, was extinguished abruptly and brutally. Her life was cut short, her dreams left unrealized, her potential untapped, all at the hands of Avila Torres. His actions sent shockwaves through the community, a stark reminder that danger can be closer than we think.
The following is the real interrogation where Jorge Torres tells detectives about the chilling events that led to Amanda Snell's murder.
All right, so tell me the story. So you walked into her house and then what?
It was her apartment on the basement.
Okay.
She woke up. She saw me. She couldn't believe her own eyes. She rubbed her eyes and she looked at me. Yeah, she's like staring at me. I jumped down and I covered her mouth before she could start screaming. So like I told you, I tied her up with half the cord. What?
You tied up her hands?
Yeah, with half her laptop cord. I was like, you can't let her go. She recognizes me.
Yeah.
Put it around her neck and I choked her out that way.
She tried to fight you?
Yeah, she's tied up. She finally passes out. Just because they pass out don't mean they're dead.
Yeah.
So I choked her out for about another 2 minutes that way.
With the cord?
Yeah, to make sure she was dead. Now I got a body to deal with. Take her and I put her on the floor. Take her off the bed. So I opened up her closet. Luckily enough, she had room in the bottom of her put her in the closet.
But his savage impulses didn't stop there. In an act of unparalleled cruelty, Avila Torres abducted and assaulted 2 women in the same state. These women, whose identities will keep undisclosed to respect their privacy, endured unimaginable horrors. Their lives were forever marred by the terror they experienced, their sense of safety shattered. These crimes further established Avila Torres's pattern of violence. Each act was methodical, each victim carefully selected. There was a chilling consistency to his actions, a signature that would eventually lead to his downfall. But at the time, he was an enigma, a faceless terror leaving a trail of victims in his wake. This was not the work of a man, it was the work of a predator, a beast driven by dark instincts. Avila Torres was a name that would soon become synonymous with fear and dread, a symbol of the evil that can lurk in the most unsuspecting of places. His violent spree continued, leaving a bloody trail in its wake. As the net tightened around Avila Torres, an unexpected connection was discovered. The discovery was not of an accomplice or a hidden motive, but a revelation that would shake the very foundation of a case that had gripped the nation. In the quiet town of Zion, Illinois, a double murder had set a horrific scene years ago. Innocent lives were lost, families were shattered, and a father, Jerry Hobbs, was arrested and confessed under duress to a crime he didn't commit. The real monster, Jorge Avila Torres, had slipped through the cracks, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. However, the tides of justice were about to turn. As investigators dug deeper into Avila Torres's crimes, they found a tie that bound him to Zion murders. This wasn't a loose thread or a hunch, but a solid, irrefutable piece of evidence. A microscopic code, unique as a fingerprint and just as damning. DNA, the same DNA that was present at the crime scenes in Virginia, where Avila Torres had committed heinous acts, was also found at the Zion murder scene. This DNA evidence was a silent witness, a beacon of truth that pointed directly at Avila Torres. Suddenly, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, and the picture it revealed was chilling. This damning evidence led to the exoneration of Jerry Hobbs, who had been living under the shadow of a crime he had not committed. This was a small solace in the face of such tragedy, but it brought a glimmer of hope that justice was finally on the horizon. But even as the truth began to emerge, the full extent of Avila Torres's crimes was yet to be uncovered. His web of deceit and violence stretched further than anyone could have imagined. The truth was finally unveiled, but the horror of Avila Torres's crimes was far from over. In the face of mounting evidence, Avila Torres could no longer hide from justice. The walls of the courtroom echoed with the weight of the testimonies, the chilling DNA evidence, and the horrifying accounts of the crimes committed by Jorge Avila Torres. The once seemingly ordinary man, now exposed as a monster, sat on trial for a string of heinous acts that had shocked the nation. The prosecution presented a case that was both compelling and damning. The DNA evidence was irrefutable. It connected Avila Torres to the double murder of 2 innocent girls in Zion, Illinois, and to the brutal assault and murder of Navy Petty Officer Amanda Jean Snell. It was the same DNA that linked him to the abduction and assault of 2 women in Virginia. But the most chilling moment came when Avila Torres's own words were used against him. A jailhouse confession, a remorseless admission of his crimes. His cold, calculated recounting of his deeds sent shivers down the spine of everyone present in the courtroom. The defense had no ground to stand on. The evidence was overwhelming, and Avila Torres's own confession sealed his fate. The gavel came down, echoing the finality of the judgment. For the murder of Amanda Jean Snell, Avila Torres was sentenced to death. For his other crimes, he received multiple life sentences. The courtroom was filled with a sense of justice being served, a monster finally being put away. But the relief was tainted with the bitter aftertaste of the horrors Avila Torres had unleashed. His confession had another significant impact. It led to the exoneration of Jerry Hobbs, who had been wrongfully arrested and confessed under duress to the murders of the 2 girls in Zion. This was a small solace in the face of such tragedy, a glimmer of justice in the shadow of a monstrous crime. Justice was served, but the scars left by Avila Torres's crimes would remain forever. His reign of terror had ended, but the pain and the wounds he inflicted would take much longer to heal, if they ever could. The legacy of Jorge Avila Torres is a chilling reminder of the monsters that can lurk in our midst, hidden beneath the guise of normality. For the families of Avila Torres's victims, the ordeal was far from over. When the gavel fell on Avila Torres's case, it did not bring the closure one might expect. Yes, justice had been served. The monster was behind bars, his reign of terror ended. But for the families of his victims, the wounds remained fresh, the heartache a constant reminder of what they had lost. The murder of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias, the 2 young girls from Zion, Illinois, left a void in the hearts of their loved ones that could never be filled. Their families were left grappling with the horrifying reality that their daughters, full of life and promise, had fallen prey to such a ruthless predator. The loss was unbearable, the grief overwhelming. And for Jerry Hobbs, Laura's father, the pain was twofold. Not only had he lost his beloved daughter, but he had also been wrongly accused of her murder. His own confession, extracted under duress, had turned him into a pariah in his own community. Even after his exoneration, the shadow of suspicion hung heavy over him. His life, too, had been irrevocably altered by Avila Torres's heinous acts. Then there was the family of Navy Petty Officer Amanda Jean Snell. Her brutal murder at the hands of Avila Torres left them mourning the loss of a daughter, a sister, a friend. The sense of injustice was palpable, their sorrow profound. In the aftermath of Avila Torres's crimes, these families have had to navigate a new normal, their lives forever scarred by their encounters with this monster. They've had to learn to live with the pain, the anger, the loss, and yet, they continue to persevere, to honor the memory of their loved ones, to ensure their names are not forgotten. In the face of unimaginable tragedy, they strive to move forward, their lives forever marked by the monster that was Jorge Avila Torres. The chilling tale of Jorge Avila Torres serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk in our midst. A seemingly ordinary man, a neighbor, a Marine, yet beneath the surface a terrifying reality was hidden. Avila Torres, a serial killer and rapist, terrorized communities and left a trail of horror that will forever mar the lives of those affected. His first known victims, Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias, were only beginning to explore the world around them. Their innocence was cruelly snuffed out, leaving a void in their families that can never be filled. The wrongful arrest of Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, added another layer of tragedy to an already heart-wrenching story. The terror didn't end there. Avila Torres, under the guise of serving his country, continued his monstrous acts. Navy Petty Officer Amanda Jean Snell, a dedicated servicewoman, became his next victim. 2 women in Virginia barely escaped his clutches, their lives forever altered by the trauma they endured. But the wheels of justice, though slow, are unrelenting. DNA evidence, the silent witness, connected Avila Torres to these heinous crimes. 100 years in prison for the double murder, a death sentence for Snell's murder, and multiple life sentences for his other crimes. This is the price Avila Torres will pay for his deeds. Yet the real cost is borne by the victims and their families. Their lives, irrevocably damaged, are testaments to the human capacity for resilience in the face of unimaginable evil. Their stories, their struggles, their quest for justice must never be forgotten. In the face of such darkness, we must never forget the victims and always strive for justice, no matter how long it takes.